So he teaches himself the law. He rises to become really one of the best lawyers in Illinois. There's that stuff going around on the internet that says, look at all the failures of Lincoln. You know, he got in debt when he was running a store, and he was turned out of the U.S. Congress, and you see all the failures. Don't be fooled. I mean, over a 30-year career, people are going to have their setbacks. Lincoln was an enormously successful person, and he wanted to leave his mark in some significant way because he did not want to just die anonymously on the frontier. But he had something different in that passion that rose beyond and above ambition. He really wanted to make a difference in this country because he identified a problem that he knew this country could not live with. And of course you know what it is, the idea of the expansion of slavery. Not so much that slavery caused the Civil War, it's the idea of the expansion of slavery that becomes the sticking point for so many. And Lincoln throws himself in that debate because he sees that this country has not resolved some fundamental principles. You had the old Missouri Compromise of 1820 that basically set a geographic argument out. It says above 3630 there's not going to be any slavery in the West. And then all of a sudden in the Compromise of 1850 you have Senator Douglas and Senator Clay coming to this compromise by saying, no, in the Western territories, it'll be popular sovereignty. The people will get to choose. So you have a geographic principle on the one hand, and you have a democratic principle on the other hand. They can't coexist in the same country. You've got to solve the issue of how slavery is going to expand logically, coherently, and in a principled manner. And even though Lincoln had served in Congress and had gone back to his law practice in the early 1850s and was making scads of money, they were able to expand their house in Springfield. He was becoming very successful in his practice in his 40s. He knew that this country was in trouble down the road. What's he been reading at night in those taverns out on the circuit? He's taken the Indiana, or then later the Illinois Code of Laws. And what are the first documents in the Code of Laws? Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Lincoln is reading those things at night, and he's working in his head again and again. All men are created equal. How are we getting ourselves into the mess where slavery, which is supposed to die out over the long haul, will continue to expand and expand and expand? We'll never see the end of it. That's what Lincoln's challenge is, and he's fired up to get back in. And now it's not anymore just to be the great lawyer that, well, his case is equal to mine, but I can win the case because I'm the better storyteller and I'm funnier. That's ambition. Lincoln had more than ambition. He discovers more than that in his life. He really wants to tackle this problem and serve the country. Leadership is about relationship, but now we see that Lincoln is also talking about leadership in terms of service. Leadership in service to your community, in terms of service to your country. That's the second thing you would notice about Abraham Lincoln. Ambitious man, yeah, but a lot more than just raw ambition. What's the third thing you would notice about Abraham Lincoln once you started talking to him? Tall, ugly, but witty and great storyteller, yes. You'd sense that you'd want to be in a relationship with this guy. You'd want to follow. You'd find him a very compelling figure. And you would also certainly see that he was ambitious, that he had the energy to take people where they wanted to go. We would certainly see that as well. That he had a commitment to this country that was unusual. But the third thing you would see about Lincoln is that he had vision. He had imagination. Great leaders have the ability to see where they want the organization they're leading to go. Lincoln had a vision for this country that would be free of slavery. We've already talked a little bit about that down the road. He observed, for example, that the Constitution itself never mentions the word slavery. It uses the euphemism, 3/5 of persons. But first of all, it's interesting, is it not, that the Constitution does concede, with all those Southerners who were in the room in 1787, the Constitution does concede that blacks are persons. They're not just chattel. And he uses that to conclude that the founders anticipated that there would be a day in our country when slavery would no longer exist. And he also looked at the clause. Remember from this nighttime reading in these taverns, going back to the Illinois Code of Laws, the first two documents in there. He'd go back to the Declaration of Independence, and he'd say, okay, all men are created equal. I see where the founders' vision is. It's my vision too. We're going to get there. Somehow we're going to get there. That's essential to Lincoln's vision, but something else about his vision is very important too, and it's rarely taught. And it's one of the things that when you're teaching Lincoln, it's important to point out to students. Lincoln not only had a vision of the North and the South coming back together. Remember, Lincoln at the beginning of the Civil War, or between the period in November when he's elected and his inauguration on March 4th, 1861, he is begging the South, don't secede. 7 states withdraw at that point. 4 more states are about to. He says, we'll keep the Union together. Let's compromise. Let's work together. Your peculiar institution I will not threaten. Remember, in the first inaugural address, he assures the South that he will not take away their property rights over these persons. He's confident that slavery will eventually die of its own. But he's going to fight against the South rebelling against the North, or the extension, any attempt to extend that slavery into the West. That's where he draws the line. 2 lines, actually. Now, Lincoln wants union above all, and we think in terms of union of North and South. But Lincoln had such a big view of this country that he's also thinking of the union between East and West. He is seeing a continental republic. He's extending Madison's argument about those little republics on the East Coast. He is seeing a continental republic that is knit together by a number of things. For example, he knows that there's been a communication revolution. This is why the Lincoln-Douglas debates are the first debates that are recorded by stenographers who are taking their notes to the telegraph office, and this is why Lincoln's going to become famous, because newspapers around the country now can get the story of the Lincoln-Douglas debates shortly after the debate takes place. A revolution in communication. And Lincoln's thinking, we can use that through this country. You also know about the Continental Railroad that's going to be so important. Lincoln supports the idea, it's in the Republican platform, of a Continental Railroad that will knit the East Coast with the West Coast and the North with the South. Transportation revolution. But then there are other things that our republic would need for it to work. It would need to attract people to fill in these lands in the West. And this is why Lincoln supported the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act, of course, would enable settlers to go through all of the great American desert. That's what Kansas and Nebraska used to be called, you know, and lands beyond. They would be able to go to these wide open spaces, and they would, in a Jeffersonian manner, you know, become the yeoman Republican farmers that Jefferson envisioned. But it would be more than that, because Lincoln also supported the Morrill Act that would establish land-grant universities in all of the states. There were 33 states when Lincoln became president, but he knew there would be many more as the West filled up. And there would have to be a provision to get those educational institutions out there so that citizen farmers would not just be stuck on the farm as subsistence dirt merchants, but would be able to go out into the marketplace.